that you got spoiled or spoiled yourself. It's been a year since we've had these social and up close network lounge presentations that we began actually last March when all this began. So we want to thank our many attendees over the year that have attended us, not only from Women Mean Business, the network, but beyond our borders and across Canada and even in the UK. So we are very thankful to all the participants that have been so loyal to us over the year here doing this. We're always about showing support, compassion, always about education, being informed for the challenging time we are facing at the present time, with pertinent topics that relate not only to one's business, but also to your personal life and overall well-being. We're also very grateful to the many speakers that over the past year that have been given us their time and shared their expertise. And some of them are online with us right now. So big hug to you all. Our WMB monthly presentations will continue as we continue to move into 2021. There are still many unknowns, even though there is a light in the tunnel, and we are excited about that. We all need to continue to support one another as we continue to embrace our new normal, and I always say, stay encouraged. Never lose that smile. Anyway, so some housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones on mute. It is being recorded because some that have registered may not be able to attend, so we want to show it on our Women Mean Business YouTube channel. So I hope that you're all okay with that. And please, use the chat room for any questions, and that Laura will be more than happy to answer after the presentation. And now, because time is precious, Josie, please do the honors of introducing Laura.
Thank you, Gabby. And yes, it is my pleasure to introduce Laura Southall. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about her. She is a financial advisor here in Kingston, Ontario, has worked in the education field. As a child, she ran multiple small businesses and spent her free time at the public library reading books about money. So at the age of, this blows me away, at the age of 15, she started saving down for a down payment on a rental property. At 15, she bought her first house at the age of 23 and began renting out the basement to cover the mortgage. Over the next 23 years, she bought, sold, renovated, and rented many of the properties. Her book, Rental Properties for Canadian Women, tells her journey and the mistakes that she has made and the strategies she has adopted. By the way, I have the book and I love the stories, Laura. It also includes case studies of women who have used real estate in different ways. Laura's mission is to empower and educate women to create a secure financial future for themselves and their families. And Laura, we would love to hear more about this, so take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Just a little technology point, Gabby. I am the one getting the messages that people are in the waiting room. So as I see them, I'm going to admit them.
Oh, thank you.
Because I'm the host now.
Yeah.
That's okay. I've got lots of practice at this.
Yes, you do.
I'm a Zoom expert. Okay, so I'm a financial advisor in Kingston, but I always start these types of presentations by telling my story so you can sort of understand where I'm coming from and why I made the decisions that I did. So I grew up in Brantford, Ontario. It's on the other side of Toronto, and it's about the same size as Kingston, but it doesn't have the universities, which I think makes a different makeup for it. So I am 46 now, and at that time, French immersion had only been in existence for 3 years. Now French immersion is pretty standard, but at that time, French immersion was a really new thing. And so people who put their children in French immersion at that time were incredibly well educated. So the doctors, dentists, ear, nose, and throat specialists, pharmacists, and my parents. And my dad worked in a dry cleaning store, and we lived in a little 2-bedroom house on the other side of the city from the school. And I had to take the city bus because there's no busing for French immersion at that time to the other side of the city for the French immersion school. And my little friends were the dentist's daughter, the ear, nose, and throat doctor's daughter, the pharmacist's daughter, and they were very wealthy. And I would go to their houses and see their things. And to compare it to Kingston, think of all the houses along King Street. Brockville's the same, where they have the houses along the water are gorgeous, and Brentford has a street like that too, where, you know, there were, my friend in that house, the one house had 9 fireplaces. There were buzzers for the servants. These people were very well off, and these were my friends, and I saw their convertibles, their ski chalets, their cottages, their beautiful running shoes, everything. And my family did not have that. And so I thought, I'm smart. I can figure this out. So I started going to the public library. I took the city bus and I read every book on money and finance. And I started running small businesses out of my house. So I did everything to make money. I've done it. I had 4 different newspaper routes. I ran a babysitting conglomerate. I ran a lending company out of my basement, and I would loan the neighborhood kids 25 cents. And then they would pay me back 30 cents on Saturday when they got their allowance. I sold anything that wasn't nailed down. I ran a day camp in my backyard starting when I was 11 for little kids, and I was profiting $200 a week when I was 11. I hired counselors from the neighborhood. I had 12 kids every morning. I did everything to make money, and I dreamt about stuff. I dreamt about buying I'm dating myself, but roller skates, and a Walkman. Yeah. No, it was a Walkman. Yeah. I want to say Discman, but it was a Walkman. It was yellow. I dreamt about all those things, but I didn't actually buy any stuff. I just liked the feeling of having this option, and I put it in my bank account, but I was always dreaming about the stuff that I would buy. And so I went to the library, read everything every book on how to be a millionaire, how to be rich, how to invest, everything. And I have to get my story in the right order here. So by the time I hit grade 9, my English teacher took our class, and I was still friends with the same group of girls. We were all in that, it was an enriched English class, and we were all in it together. And our English teacher took us on a tour of Western University. And we went through the campus, and if you haven't seen the Western campus, it's a lot like Queens. It's beautiful. The old buildings and the big rolling lawns, and we walked around, and I got straight A's. I got the same marks as my little friends, and I thought, I'm going to go to this university. This looks awesome. I'm going to have so much fun here. And then the woman giving the tour took us into a room and started talking about cost. And I looked at my friends, and then I looked at the board where she was writing the cost, and I thought, I have been obsessing over money buying me stuff, and I have completely missed the point, because my friends are going to be able to choose to go to university because they have money, because their families have money, and I am not going to have that choice. So I thought about that, and it was an 1.5-hour bus ride back from Western. And I thought, okay, I have to figure this out. I want to go to university. At that point, I had $2,000 in my bank account, which was a lot for a grade 9 student at the time. It's probably a lot for a grade 9 student today too. And I thought, okay, first of all, I've learned something here. Money's not about stuff. It's about choice. So forget the stuff. And then I knew from my reading that I needed to make I had $2,000. I needed to make my money work for me. I had read that in the books, but I didn't really know what that meant. So I thought, I have to figure out how to make my money work for me, because I can only work so hard. And I really did work very hard. I can only work so hard. I need to make my money work for me if I'm going to be able to pay for university. So the next morning I went to the bank. And this lovely lady helped me, and I'm forever grateful that she didn't make me feel stupid. And I said, I have $2,000. I want to make my money work for me. And I don't know how to do that. And she said, what are you going to use the $2,000 for? And I said, I'm going to go to university in 4 years. And she said, okay, we're going to lock it into a 4-year GIC, so guaranteed investment certificate. So it's locked in. And this was the 80s. So it was 11%. So she is explaining this concept to me that my money would be locked in and I would earn 11%. And then she did the math right in front of me. My $2,000 was going to be worth $3,034 at the end of the 4 years. And I was blown away. I thought, I have been taking care of snotty-nosed kids for $2 an hour, and now I'm going to make $1,034 for just lending the bank my money for 4 years. Like, it would have just sat in my bank account, so this was way better. And this second light bulb went on that I could make my money work for me, which I think is a concept that lots of adults still don't have, that we always think we need to have a job to make money. But if you can make your money work for you, then at some point you don't need a job. So I felt like I understood, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make our money work for us. So then I went back to the library and I started reading some more. And one of the books I read said that 75% of the millionaires in the US made their money through real estate. Now, someone has corrected me recently and told me that that stat is now actually 90%. But at the time I thought, okay, those odds are good. 75% made millions of dollars through real estate. I'm going to try this. So then I started reading every book on how to buy rental properties, managing rental properties, anything to do with rental properties. And I quickly realized that I needed a down payment, but I was only 15. That was problematic. And I needed a job to be able to get a mortgage. So I started saving $50 a month into a mutual fund when I was 15. So I kept working multiple part-time things, doing all these things, saving money, because I knew I needed to save more money for university. But I started this $50 a month, knowing that my goal was to buy a rental property the second I graduated from university. So I kept that $50 a month on autopilot, contributing from my bank account from when I was 15 until I graduated from university. And I did save up $20,000. And I was able to pay for my first 2 years. At that time, it was $10,000 a year to go to university. I didn't go to Western. I went to Queen's. I was able to pay for my first 2 years myself. And then I got student loans for the last 3 years. So I graduated with $24,000 in student loans, but I kept doing my $50 a month the whole time. So when I graduated, I got a job right away as a teacher, which also that never happens anymore. I got a job in Brockville as a teacher, and I'm dating myself because this was 1998. And my salary was $38,000, but I was so tired of paying rent, and I thought, I know I want to buy a rental property, but I don't think this is possible because I have $24,000 in student loans. But I knew I needed to take the student loans to get my degree to be able to get the job. So I went to the CIBC at Bagot and Brock in Kingston, and another lovely woman didn't make me feel stupid. And I said, at this point, I scoured the real estate section every single day. That was in the time when we still read a newspaper. I scoured the rental properties or the real estate section every day. I could tell you the price of every property that was for sale in Kingston. And I said, I want to buy this house. And it was a 3-bedroom bungalow. Hold on, I got to share my screen. I've jumped ahead in my presentation.
All right.
I always start with good intentions with a PowerPoint, and then are you seeing that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the house I showed her. It's 317 Kings Court. by the 6 doors down from the old QE High School, now KSS. And the asking price was $104,000. And I said, this is what I want to buy. It's a 3-bedroom bungalow. And she said, do you have a down payment? And I showed her that I had $6,000 in that mutual fund account. And she said, I said, but I have $24,000 in student loans. And she said, that's okay. You use the $6,000 for your down payment. And then your mortgage is going to be $625 and you can buy this house. And I said, huh, okay, thank you. So I went and I put an offer in and I got that house for $98,500. I moved in and I did a little bit of fixing up to the basement and then I rented it out for $625. So that my basement apartment paid my mortgage, which was fantastic. And I felt like it was magic. I couldn't believe that somebody else was paying my mortgage. Okay, so hold on, I'm going to jump back to my presentation again because I do tend to get ahead of myself here. So for me, and rental properties are not for everyone, but for me, I was very determined to be wealthy. And I don't really shy away from that. I wanted a nice life for my family. I wanted to have a husband and kids, and I wanted to create a stable and nice home life like I had seen the kids growing up have, where they went on family trips and went on ski trips and went out to dinners. And I wanted that for my family, and I was very determined that I would get that. So to me, rental properties made so much sense because the bank, first of all, was going to lend me 95% in that case. Now they'll only lend me 75%, but 95% of the purchase price the bank was going to lend me. So to me, an investment where the bank is going to lend you 95% of the price seemed like a good idea. If you went to the bank and said, I want to buy 500,000 in stocks, they would not lend you 95% of the purchase price. But with rental properties, or properties in general, real estate, they see them as much more stable and they're willing to lend to you. Which means that you can invest a lot more because what happens is the building appreciates. So it goes up in value, and it's going up in value not based on your down payment, but based on the value of the property. So with my $98,500 purchase price, $5,800 was the down payment, but the house appreciated. And if I'm conservative and said it only appreciated at 2% a year, I'm still earning $2,000 on the $98,500, not on my $5,800. The appreciation is on the whole purchase. So what the bank lent me. And then the tenants are paying off the mortgage. So it's not me paying back the bank for the investment, it's somebody else. So to me, that was like, okay, this makes sense on many levels. The bank is going to lend me the money to invest. The investment is going to go up in value, not based on what I put in, but what the whole purchase price. And then somebody else is going to pay back the bank. So to me, that made complete sense. And of course, I was 23 at the time, so I was a bit naive in terms of how that was going to look long-term managing tenants. But I felt like it was worth whatever hassle was going to come up because this to me was a huge win. And when I was calculating things out, I could not see how I could save those amounts every month. So back to my story for a second, I jumped ahead. So the tenant moved into the basement. He started paying $625 a month. That covered my mortgage. Now I had a job, so even though I was really aggressive with my student loans and paid them off in 3 years, I still started putting $400 a month into a mutual fund. So I knew I had to save the next down payment. So it took me 3 years to pay off my student loans and save another down payment. So I saved 15,000 and I put a down payment on another property. So that started me off in the real estate world. And then I went from there. So I'm going to flip to my, the difference between a house, which really was my first property, even though I was renting out the basement. Your house and a rental property are two very different things. So your principal residence, your house, has a lower mortgage rate, where a rental property would have a higher mortgage rate. Your house, your principal residence, you would normally have to put down a lower down payment, so 5%. A rental property can be anywhere between 20 and 30%, depending on the bank. In terms of insurance, your house has a lower insurance rate because you're living in it, and generally you would take better care of it than a tenant. So always the insurance on a rental property is usually double what it would be for a principal residence. Your house, you love it. There's some emotional attachment to it. Your rental property, you might not love it, but it just needs to cover the costs. It needs to cover its expenses every month. Your house, I always say, can you rent the basement? Because that's been huge for me. Your rental property, should be at least 2 units. I know, and this has been debated multiple times, that of course you could have a rental property that's just 1 unit. I find it harder to make the numbers work to cover the costs. It's not impossible in some situations, but it's certainly harder to make a single unit work. So I have always looked for bungalows or duplexes, triplexes, and bungalows because they have the bigger footprint. So when you're looking at a bungalow, it has a bigger basement generally than a 2-story house, which is narrower and goes up higher. So if you buy a bungalow, then the basement is bigger, you can get more rent from it. It seems to make more sense to me. Someone told that to me when I was 19. I signed up for a rental property seminar, and I was so out of my element with all these wealthy men that were looking to buy rental properties. And there I was, 19 years old. And the guy giving the seminar said, if you only take one thing from this seminar, when you're buying your first house, buy a bungalow with the potential for a basement apartment. And so I wrote that down and I remembered it. And 4 years later, I did that. And I say it in the book, and I've said it many times to many women, but it really makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
So when you're looking to pick your first rental property, I think I get asked this question a lot, so I put this slide in. Location is really, really important. You cannot improve a neighborhood yourself, but you can improve the house. So if you pick a good location, and it does not need to be the best location, but it needs to be a good location, you can, even if the house is run down or beat up, you can fix up the house, but you can't fix the location. So I always think that location is the number one thing to look for. I always say look for 2 units instead of 1. I just feel like if you take one house, you can charge, let's take Kingston rates, for instance. If you had a 3-bedroom house, you could charge $2,000 maybe for that. If you divided that into 2 units and had 3 bedrooms on one floor and 2 bedrooms in the basement, you could probably charge $1,800 upstairs and $1,200 in the basement. So you would end up with $3,000 instead of $2,000. It just makes it easier to cover your costs. Look for the option to rent out the basement apartment. So there's things to look for, but a side entrance is really important because it's hard to put in a different entrance if it's not already there. At least the rough in for plumbing, so that there's a water source down there, and then you can put a bathroom and a kitchen in easily. Those are the two main things that I look at when I'm looking for a property where I might put in a basement apartment. And then consider adapting a finished basement to a unit. So sometimes a basement is completely empty and you would have to start from scratch, and that's not impossible, but oftentimes there's pieces at least of the basement that are finished and you can adapt, which is what I did with the King's Court house. Okay. So in terms of, people always ask me, should I buy this property? Should I buy this property? It really comes down to the numbers. So you just want to crunch the numbers, and it's pretty simple. What's the income on the unit? So she's going to get $2,000 from unit number 1. This is Sophie. She's buying a duplex at $350,000. And unit number 2 is going to give her $1,200. So she's got $3,200 coming in. And then she goes through and figures out her expenses. So taxes are $300 a month, utilities are $350, insurance is $100. I always say to allow 10% of the gross rent for maintenance, and that's sort of a minimum. But if you're putting that aside every month, then you have money set aside for maintenance. And then the mortgage payment, $1,700. So she's got a total of $2,770. So I don't know if profit's the right word, but she's ahead by $430 a month. If I were Sophie, I would consider buying this property because it makes sense. It covers its costs. In terms of the profit, I would say don't count on the profit going into your bank account for the first year or two. You want it to accumulate. And then if you have any big expenses, you've got a buffer, or if there's a vacancy, you've got a buffer. So I always think don't count on your building making money for the first couple of years at least. And sometimes it just covers its costs. And that's okay because the tenant is paying off the mortgage and the building is appreciating. But you don't want to be having to support your rental properties. So you don't want to be paying out of pocket. So as long as they cover the costs, I think it's worth considering, depending on the neighborhood, of course. So, oh, sorry, I should have you in. So once you've bought your first rental property, or you've decided to move out of your first house, then you might want to expand your empire. So for some people, one rental property is enough, and it's really about your personality and what you can handle. For me, owning rental properties made a lot of sense numbers wise. I could see long term that my net worth was going to go up and up the more I invested in rental properties. So then I bought more. So this is another one on King's Court, same thing with a basement apartment. This one's on Hillcrest with a basement apartment. Oh, sorry, that one's on Dundas. No, that's Hillcrest. That one was on Dundas, Adelaide. That one was a triplex. And I kept buying them. And then when I was at about 7 of the little houses, this one came on the market, and it was an 8-unit building. I thought this was going to be completely impossible. So I got a private to get financing for. At this point, I had twins and I was on mat leave, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to get financing. So I found a private lender to finance the mortgage on this at the time, 7%, which was 2% above what was normal, but I didn't think there was any way a bank would loan to me on that one. And then a year later, a bank agreed to take that mortgage on. So then we dropped it down. So then these buildings make sense, the bigger ones to me, no more than 10 units. So then I bought that one, which is 9 units, and this one, which is 9 units as well. So I'm just showing you some. We've done flips, and my husband is very handy, which was very helpful. Real estate is not what he would probably choose, but we would buy properties that were in rough shape and he would fix them up. He doesn't like the hassles with the tenants. So I was the person that managed the money and the tenants and the showing and the organizing the financing with the banks. But he was the brute strength in the cleaning and fixing department. Not that I didn't go in and clean a lot of apartments myself, but he was definitely part of the whole event. So in terms of money and what you're looking at, the property needs to cover itself, and I can't say that enough. You don't want to be using your personal money to subsidize a rental property. But then the next step from that is using the bank or other people's money to finance as much of the purchase as you can. So you want the least amount of your own money going into each property, because the less you can put in, the more you can buy. So if I only put a $30,000 down payment on this rental property, but I have $100,000 in my savings, then I can take $70,000 and invest it somewhere else. And not necessarily a rental property, but maybe you're putting that in stocks and bonds. So you want the least amount of your own money to go into a rental property. So if you can, use the bank's money for the whole purchase. So a way that a lot of people do that is they take a line of credit off their principal residence, and they use that for the down payment on the rental property. So if you have a house and the mortgage on it is $200,000 and it's worth $500,000, the bank will give you a line of credit for $100,000, and you can use that for the down payment. So this is a great way to buy a rental property. It's all financed. You can write off all the interest. You just have to make sure that the property still covers its costs, because you don't want to be paying that line of credit yourself. So you have to make sure there's enough rent coming in from the rental property to cover all the costs. Always important to keep a separate bank account for each property as well. I could write a whole book on taxes, but it's really important that you be able to track your expenses. So if you have a separate bank account, it's really easy. Just debit any expenses or pay the expenses out of that account. And then you know at the end of the year, okay, these were my expenses for that property. It's pretty simple. You print out that bank account and you have your record keeping. So going to get financing, this is, for me, in the beginning, it was terrifying. As I progressed, it became more fun because I started to know what they were looking for, and I sort of took it as a challenge to figure it out. But when you're going to get financing for your first or second or third property, it's really important that you put yourself in as good as a position as possible. So you're going to pay off any little debts that you have. You would check your credit score and make sure there's no mistakes, and there are often many mistakes. So do this long before you actually go to the bank. Check your credit score, make sure there's no mistakes, and then have them corrected. And then have a binder, or if it's electronic, have something that has all the possible paperwork the bank could want. So notices of assessment from your income tax returns, T4s, pay stubs, investment statements, a net worth statement, any debts or loans that you still have it all laid out for them to make their life easy. And then it's much easier to get approved and get answers. In the beginning, I was scared to go for financing because I felt I was really young and I thought, who's going to lend to me? But then I started to look at it as a learning experience, and I asked questions and I tried to find out as much as possible, which made me a lot more confident going in. I used a mortgage broker in the beginning. I used banks for probably the first 4, and then I went to a mortgage broker because their setup is great. They know all the lenders. They know what everyone is looking for. They're a wealth of information if you find a good one. And it's the lender that pays them. So they get paid, I don't know, around $2,000 for a deal, depending on the size of the mortgage. So they're being paid by whoever the lender is, and then they find you the lender. So they're sort of working on your behalf to make this work. And I find them to be a wealth of information if you find a good one. So I used a mortgage broker for, I don't know, 5 or 6 properties. But now I have a credit union that just loans me for any properties that I want. So it makes it easier. So hold on, I'll go back to my presentation here. So the downsides. So this is the things that hold people back from rental properties, tenants. So it's really important to pick good tenants. And I know that I sometimes come across as bitter in this section. I don't mean to be. There's some lovely, lovely tenants, but it's been 23 years of me dealing with tenants. And there are some headaches out there. So if you can avoid the headaches, it is good for you. I learned, and it was a steep learning curve, to ask as many questions as humanly possible. So when the tenant or prospective tenant first makes contact with you, you start by asking as many questions as you can. Where do they work? How many people in their family? Do they have any pets? Do they smoke? Any questions you can ask them. And that's at the initial point of contact. So you haven't shown them an apartment at that point. So I get as much information as possible. And depending on the unit and the demand for the unit, I then, if I think they might be a good fit, then I show them the apartment. So if there's a huge demand, I would do a group showing. So I would line them up between 1 and 3 on a Saturday afternoon. If it's not as much of a demand, or I think the tenant is a really good prospective tenant, then I'll do an individual showing. I ask again the same questions that I asked on the phone, because I learned also quickly that people sometimes lie. So if you ask the same questions again, you might get different answers. I ask where they live, how long they've been there, anything at all, always conversational. But I get a lot of information, and people will tell you an awful lot. But there's red flags. People that move around a lot are not usually good tenants, because they're only going to stay for a short time, and then you have turnaround. You always want people who have jobs and a source of income. A lot of pets is a warning sign, and I love my dog, but a lot of pets is hard on a unit. There's things that you learn to look out for. And really, it's about trusting your instinct. I think my husband and I had a rule: if we had an ounce of doubt, we didn't rent to the person. You have to trust your instincts, and if you like the person and you have a good rapport, then that's more important than anything. So picking the tenant, if you can get that skill, then everything else falls into place. Because if you have a good tenant, then it's easy. And I've had tenants that don't call me for 3 years, that they've been awesome tenants that have fixed things themselves. I have one tenant that's been in a unit for 15 years, never hear from them. Some amazing tenants, but I've also had some headaches. So once you've mastered the tenants, then you need to think about how to deal with maintenance. And I break it down more in the book, but there's immediate maintenance, and then there's ongoing maintenance. So you need to have a plan for how you're going to deal with immediate maintenance. And it depends on the tenant and the unit. Sometimes you just want them to call whoever to fix the fridge, and you send you the bill and you pay it. Or maybe you want to be the one to call the repair person. I always like it to be as much in the tenant's hands as possible, because then they can schedule the person to come whenever they want. And then there's the ongoing maintenance. You have to maintain your properties, or you know, it catches up with you at some point. You're not going to get as quality of a tenant. So you need to plan for, say, a roof being done, or windows being done, or just going in and repainting. So I'm jumping down to turnover, but people handle turnover in different ways. I know people that like to have a unit rented all of the time. So if a tenant gives their notice, they're going in and showing to prospective tenants while that tenant is still in there. Sometimes that works if the tenant has nice furniture and keeps the unit nice. Sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes that's a big hassle. For me, I liked to let the unit go vacant, go in, refresh with paint and cleaning, and then show it to prospective tenants. I felt like it was a chance to refresh the unit, and also you tend to get better tenants when it's nice and clean and repainted. But that means leaving it vacant for at least a month, and sometimes two, right? Because usually it would take a month to get it cleaned and prepped, and then a month to show it. So you have to allow for that in your budgeting. You want to allow, and that's why accumulating a slush fund of usually $5,000, I always say to have $5,000 as a slush fund for every rental property, so that you can make those decisions. But maybe you have, you know, a lovely couple in the unit and they're both at work all day, they keep it clean, and it's easy to show prospective tenants while they're at work, so it's no hassle, the unit looks good. Then in that case, I would probably not take the turnover to refresh, and I would fill it with new tenants. So you have to decide sort of. I decided on a case-by-case basis, but more often I liked it to be vacant and to paint and refresh. But some people like to have their units full all the time. And when you run the numbers, it makes sense to have your units full all the time. I always address vacancies because people ask that. In Kingston, we don't really have a lot of vacancies. There's such a demand. If you have a vacancy, then you either have priced your unit very high and you're out of line with the market, or you're incredibly fussy. Because I have a property manager now, but he says he has to turn off his phone every time we put an ad on Kijiji, because the demand is so high. And then the final downside is responsibility. There's responsibility that goes along with owning units. You know, people can call you in the middle of the night with a problem. You don't go away on a vacation, not that anyone's vacationing right now, but you don't go away on a vacation without leaving a backup plan. So there is responsibility that goes along with rental properties. But the finish line, it's important to keep the finish line in mind. So what's going to happen 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Why are you doing all of this? Well, there's some options. A paid off property where you're still collecting rent can be your income in retirement, for sure. A paid off property that's worth a lot more than you paid, you can sell for a lot of money. I look at my net worth, and there's no human way that I could have saved the amount of my net worth. As I could have been as cheap as possible and saved so much every month. But if you combine appreciation and the tenants paying down the mortgages, it's astronomical what I have done in 23 years. And I mean, I'm on a bigger scale than lots of people, but even just having one rental property makes a huge difference in someone's financial well-being. So that's the end of my presentation, but I'm sure people have lots of questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Laura. That was I love the line, money's not about stuff, it's about choices.
Mhm.
That is so true,
It
you know,
is.
and then the fact that you started so young is fabulous. And then your finish line and all that you spoke about was very informative and inspiring for many.
I feel like for women especially, and I'm sure it's probably true of men too, but I feel that life tends to throw women curveballs. We're the ones that get pregnant, stay home with babies, have to take care of sick children. We have to take care of our ailing parents. Like there's all these responsibilities that come with being a woman, and we don't always foresee them. And if you can be strong financially, you can make choices around those responsibilities. Um, and for me I stayed at home with my kids for 7 years, and all of my friends didn't have that option. They
Yeah.
needed to work. And I had created enough of a base at that point that I was able to stay at home for 7 years. And that was, to me, that is the most important thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I will forever be grateful to real estate for allowing that to happen, because it is only because of real estate that happened. And when my real estate is a headache, I remember that and go, yeah, I got 7 years with my kids. So,
That's a
and
wonderful gift and how important that is
it
too.
is. And I still see benefits, but that one to me, like we are able to go on a nice family trip every year, and that's courtesy of rental properties. These are things that I'm so grateful for. So the headaches that go with real estate are real, but also the benefits are huge.
Well, my accountant always said real estate is real money.
Yeah.
He
it
always
is.
said, right? So that's wonderful. Josie, have you got anything to say?
Well, Laura, this is extremely important information. I was reading your book and I was thinking, where was this when I was younger? You were talking about your daughter taking a civics class, and my daughter, I just happened to take in high school two courses actually that had to do with business.
Yeah.
And really it was life business. The teacher, I'm forever grateful to him. He taught compound interest, what a mortgage is, information that's so useful in life. And my daughter laughed and she goes, this I'm going to use, but how to use parabola in math, I'm not so sure about that. And to listen to her, like she just, at a very young age, this girl began to understand why debt is dangerous, credit card debt. And she understood the power of compound interest. And I'm listening to her and I'm thinking, holy mackerel, you're 17. You're going to be fine.
I do agree that and that's why I've worked with Limestone so much, that it's missing in the education system.
100%.
100%.
They are trying to, the Ontario government came out last year with a financial literacy piece in the grade 10 careers and civics. So, which is good. It is good. Just the problem is that the teachers aren't really qualified to teach it and they're not comfortable to teach it. So that's where I have come in and spoken to a lot of the Limestone students, and it's been amazing, but there's so much more work to be done. I actually started a second book because I feel like I sort of jumped ahead with this one. And we really need to talk about financial literacy for women. Though I don't have a working title, that's where my starting point was, let's make women empowered and literate about money. And it also goes into sort of the emotional baggage that we all have around money. And then it's generational too, right? We watched our parents and how they dealt with money. They were influenced by their parents. We have all these habits ingrained about money and what we think is normal and what is not, and how the guilt around money, there's so much. So there's so much to say. So I started writing that one, but it's going to take me a year probably.
But that's fantastic.
Yeah,
like every
it's fun.
step forward, right?
Sorry?
Every little step forward will make a
Yes.
huge difference. sense. Yeah.
Well,
But
I
it's-
really, with this book, I was stunned and amazed by the response and how many women were looking for this information. I had no idea. I really did it so that I could have a book to give to my clients, because I have a lot of clients who have rental properties. And I thought this will just answer the questions, and it puts all the information in one book. And then the response to the book has been just crazy. So I had no idea that there was that many people looking for information about rental properties. Crazy to me. I barely know any other women who own rental properties, and now all these women want rental properties.
Came out of the woodwork.
Yeah. Well, I think women are looking for answers.
Yes,
I think,
absolutely they are.
and they're recognizing that a job or even a career isn't enough to
Mhm.
provide what they want to provide for their families, and they're willing to consider other options. And I don't know that that was the same in the past. So I think we're at a turning point for women, where women are saying, yeah, I want a really nice life for my family, and I can do this myself. I can figure this out. And I don't think we've had that before in our history.
Well, I always hear that, like, security is the number one,
Yeah.
you know, the security. And for, as you say, for your families, but also your retirement, that
Mhm.
you can live. I believe that freedom of having that security is the freedom. That's what you want, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Well, it's like
so,
you said, choices, right? Money is really about choices. And like you said, it gave you the choice to stay home with your children for 7 years, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I think women are looking at this thinking, okay, crazy things may be happening in my life. I do want to stay home with my children. How am I going to do that financially? Or how am I, going to take some time off work to take care of my mom and dad, or whatever the case may be. I think women have always wanted to find answers for those extremely important questions. And I think this is a very important one. I think they want to find a woman who's done this successfully,
because
and
that's the inspiration.
to talk and just say, okay, how did you do this, Laura?
And
Oh.
and because of being a financial advisor, women have found me because they have real estate, which has been fascinating to me, because for years I didn't know any women that owned real estate. I felt like I was this big anomaly. And now I feel like I know a lot because they all became my clients. So I put their stories in the book, which the response to that, like the feedback I get is, I loved the case studies. I loved seeing, I only did it one way. And that was buying those little houses, but there's so many ways you can own rental properties, right? You can own a cottage and rent it out. You can Airbnb in your house. There's so many different ways, and every woman does it differently too. And that's why I put all the case studies in, because I just felt like all these women have great ideas, and everyone is trying to find what works for their lifestyle and their family. And there's so many different ways of doing it. I think there's questions going into the chat.
Okay, let's have a
Hold
look.
on here. In Ontario, I read that it is illegal for landlord to collect safety deposits. That is true. You are not allowed to collect a safety deposit in Ontario. You are in other provinces. Is it true, and how do you cover the damage? I've actually never had damage from a tenant. That's not really a big issue. People that leave garbage sometimes. Sometimes they leave furniture that they don't want to move. But damage, there's not that much you can do, really. Like, if you have a tenant that trashes your unit, then I guess you could have damage. But normally people just are moving out and moving to a new place. They might leave it a bit messy, but I wouldn't worry about not being able to collect a damage deposit.
But doesn't that get back to your screening and your initial screening of,
It does.
keep that asking those right questions and going with your intuition, right? Does that, yeah.
You are allowed to ask for last month's rent in Ontario, and I always do that. I always ask for last month's rent up front. And if somebody can't give you last month's rent, then that's, to me, a sign that there's going to be payment problems in the future. So if they can't give you last month's rent, I wouldn't take them as a tenant. And you are allowed to do that. Sherry asked about secondary suites. Yes. The basement apartments. Oh, is Sherry not? Oh, there you are, Sherry.
Hi, thanks, Laura. I loved your story. And I wish I could rewind the clock, the hands of the clock.
Me too.
I've been very happy with my husband and I were military, and so every time we got posted, we kept our house, we rented it, and then we moved forward.
Oh, that's great.
Well, yeah, but I'm going to be really candid. About 10 years ago, things weren't going well, and we thought, let's liquidate. We paid capital gains on everything. It was not ideal.
No.
Let's say. We got a great relationship right now. We're building, and so that's good. But those are some of the choices that you make, right, as you navigate the life thing. In any case, we are living in Kingston. We've owned our house since 2001. A lot of great equity there. But we're starting to build a house. Yeah, we've decided that that's going to make our marriage stronger.
Building a house?
Yeah. It's not.
Okay.
But
Good. I'm glad you're joking, because that would be very bad.
Big joke. But we're thinking of, in that new place, putting in a secondary suite or something that we can rent out.
Mhm.
And so I just had questions about whether or not that's a good idea, or does it have to be a separate unit or a secondary suite? Like, what's the difference between those two things? They've come into my radar.
Yeah. So yes, and yes to all your answers. Of course, put it in. Make it a full separate unit, and really all you have to do is be able to block it off at the staircase, and then have a door outside. So, and then I don't know if you have kids or grown kids or what, but then you can have it as access to your house or not, right? If you decide to rent it out. If you want to rent it as an apartment, you have to apply to the city. It's $3,500 to get them to approve. They've been much more lenient about that given our vacancy rates. There are some hoops you have to jump through, but they've been much better than they used to be.
Okay.
About making it legal. So there's like some requirements, like a fire door, that kind of thing that you'd have to go through if you were going to make it legal. Then there's like other options, right? I have women that I know. I was on a call with another women's group a couple of weeks ago, and there's so many women that have a finished basement, and it's not a technical second unit, but they Airbnb it on the weekends when people come into town. And they have extra income coming from that too. I'm a huge Airbnb-er. The house that we are in, this is our family house and it's downtown, but we have a cottage in Charlotte Lake that we go to every weekend. So all summer I Airbnb this house while we're at the cottage. And I charge $600 a night for this house. And on the peak times, I charge $1,000 a night. So if there's something going on in the city, Tragically Hip concert, alumni weekend, that kind of thing, then I up the rates to $1,000 a night to make it worth my while. But that makes, and then we went to England 2 summers ago for 2 weeks. I Airbnb'd this house while we were in England, and it paid for the trip. So there's Airbnb, there's ways to make money there too.
That's great.
I do a section in the book on Airbnb. And that's what happened. The one women's group, I did a talk about the book, and then they asked me to come back and just do a talk on Airbnb because there's so many women in Kingston, and it seems like it's women doing Airbnb. And part of it is the work involved with Airbnb is, you're doing the laundry, you're washing the sheets, you're turning the beds over, you're wiping down the bathrooms. And it's traditionally work done by a woman, right? But they're also seeing the benefits, because the one summer I made $15,000 on Airbnb. So there's hassle factor to that one too,
Right.
for sure. I had to tidy my house every Friday. And then I have to come back and do the laundry from 6 bedrooms. But to me, $15,000 so that we could go to our cottage every weekend in the summer seemed to make sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it did. And
Wow.
the England trip required more organization because I'd booked a cleaning lady in between each stay. I booked someone to come in and do the laundry, and I booked someone to come and do the garbage and recycling. But still, the cost of all of the 3 people was $700 for the 2 weeks, and the amount I brought in was over $5,000. So it seemed to make sense to me too.
Yeah.
It
Very
paid
much.
for a lot of the trip, which was
Love
great.
it.
Mhm.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
we'll have to get you back for that Airbnb when all that opens up again. I know my friend
I
has one.
think,
She's a super host.
yeah,
So they great business. Great.
I lost my superhost status over COVID because I declined so many people. I didn't feel comfortable being the person who let people from Toronto come to their house in Kingston.
No, I don't blame you at all.
Yeah, but then I declined 17 people in a row and I lost my superhost status. So
They'll come back.
yeah, I'll get over it. I'm still getting bookings.
Any other
Um,
questions we have here? Any more questions?
Oh, sorry, there's one that just came into the chat here. Okay, from Verna. Do you recommend using one of the property management firms in town? They take 7 and 8% and do all your screening. Yeah, for sure. And if we had had more time, I had a whole slide on property managers. Definitely, for some people, that is a really good choice. I think you have to screen who you're using for a property manager and find one that's the right fit for you, because they all have a different focus, right? So somebody might be really good at maintenance, which is great, right? You have somebody maintaining your property, but if they're not good at collecting rent, then you don't have money coming in. So you sort of have to find someone that fits your values and your way of doing things. When my youngest child was 4 months old and I had twins that were not yet 2, I changed from managing my properties myself to a property manager. I went through 2 different ones, and then found one that I've been with now for more than 10 years. And he is fantastic at collecting rent, but he's not that great at maintenance. Love him, but he's not that great about maintenance. So I had to like sort of shut my eyes a little bit and not be so stressed about it. Like sometimes I would drive by and be like, oh my gosh, that porch needs to be painted. And I would have handled it differently, but he does a really good job at handling rent, and I don't have to think about what's going on with those properties. I just get a check every month. So, there's benefits definitely. And for me, with the 3 little kids, I just mentally couldn't do it anymore. I'd already been managing my properties for 12 years at that point. I knew everything there was to know about managing properties, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So it was either I was at Sherry's point, right? Where you go, I can't handle this, I'm going to sell it all, or I'm going to hire someone to deal with it. So I didn't want to sell it all. So I hired a property manager. And there's a whole section in the book on property management too.
Get the book.
Yeah, sorry. I don't, is there a service? So Diane McCoy, is there a service that screens potential renters? That would be a property manager. And you can get property managers that do different things too. Like there's some that will pay all the bills associated with the house. There's some that will just pick your tenants for you. Yeah, there's lots of options in terms of property managers. I always think that I do a better job picking tenants than anybody, but I had to let that go. And now I love what I do being a financial advisor. I really, really love my job. So having a property manager allows me to focus on my job and my kids. So I had to just sort of relinquish some control.
Well, you're certainly a great resource with all the experience that you have, Laura, with who you work with and all that. So that's wonderful that we're delighted you're here in Kingston.
Oh, I'm happy to be on here. When you said we should have you back for Airbnb, which of course I'd be happy to do, but maybe you should have me back for financial literacy, and then I could
Yes.
do a financial literacy basics for everyone.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We can, as we're planning ahead for sure, definitely. Are there any other questions from anyone? I hope you enjoyed. I think it was it's phenomenal, the information. It certainly plants a lot of seeds of opportunity. And you
Well-
know what? You didn't have any fear, even though you say it's uncomfortable, but you approached that fear and you kept on your journey. You were consistent in your perseverance in what was important to you. And that is remarkable. And look what you've created, you know?
Oh, thank
Mm.
you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I do feel that action is the most important thing. And even if you're scared and you just take one step forward, then that sort of quells your fears a little bit and you just take one step forward. So I've always felt like when I feel afraid, which I do regularly, if I can do something that's action oriented, like I'm afraid to go ask for financing, I'll make a call and make an appointment to the mortgage broker so that I've taken one step in that direction. And I feel like that's a good life skill to learn. And I teach
Oh,
my
big
daughters
time.
that too. Just take action.
One thing I heard about the word fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yeah, that's really good,
Isn't
actually.
that good? Yeah.
Yeah. And we blow it up in our minds, right? The
Oh,
fear.
yeah, yes, very much so.
Mhm.
Doubt,
Mhm.
so, but thank you. It was very, very informative. And we just have a few announcements, if I may, take a little bit more of everybody's time. Our next presentation is scheduled for April 20th at 10:30 again in the morning. And we will have Nancy Corrigan from C3 Inc. And it's a communications company. And this is what she wrote. Think about the many ways that you communicate with your customers. Are your methods getting results? Is there a better way? Don't guess, get strategic. So that was one of her lines that she sent us. And I'm not sure if everybody knows, Josie and I are very honored and privileged to be working with the Limestone District School Board in so many aspects in their speaker series and bringing business and education together. And we are putting the next presentation for them. It's an evening presentation, which is March 23rd. And we are very fortunate to have back Rhonda Barnett, who's president and COO of Avit Manufacturing, who spoke at our Salute to Women in Trades last June. And her goal is, Josie, am I right in saying 100,000 women in trades in 5 years?
5 years.
And she's quite a lady, so we're delighted to have her back. And then also we have a lovely lady, Becky Smith from Skills Ontario. So we're really enjoying this project because everything that we do in a community here, it all aligns somehow, and we're helping the future of our children. And Laura, when you're talking about financial literacy, I just wish we had that when I was in grades, high school and all this kind of stuff. It is so important for that. So you're such a role model, and I'm so glad that you do speak at the Limestone District School Board. And you never know where all this can lead to, eh? I think it's so, so important. So we're delighted. Our newsletter comes out every 2 weeks. And if you haven't registered with womenmeanbusiness.ca, please do so you receive it